Take it away, Dave and Mecci.
Thank you, Nighthawk, and welcome to Shiny Side Out with
Dave
and Mecci. And we're broadcasting live from the Sydney studios in Australia, down under. Jump into the chat room at freedomslips.com. We're there right now and discuss with us topics, you can think while you're on the air. You can listen from there too and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. You can check out shinysideout.net for our show archives, notes, and links we paste into the chat during the show. Lots of information there, guys. It's easy to listen to Revolution Radio. Dave knows how easy it is, right?
do.
If you live in Kentucky, you can tune in on FM. You just simply find WZZR 101.3, or you get an app, Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, Radio Tuner, or our very own Shiny Side Out app. At home, if you have a Grace tabletop digital radio, you can listen to us, or if you drive around in a GM motor vehicle, you may have a receiver-enabled radio in there. And these are all revolutions in radio, guys, okay? No longer are you bound to your radio. The number, you can also buy a CD of your favorite host, hopefully us, for the 2014 season. Each CD costs $30, and you can check out the info on the station's website, so you don't have to go to YouTube. The number to call in if you're in the United States of America is 347-688-2902. The number again, 347-688-2902. Or you can simply join us via Skype and at Freedom Screen. Solaris, once again, had a great show. What a shock, Dave.
Oh, I know, huh? Dan Willis, awesome interview. I was actually, Mecci, just to let the cat out of the bag. I was talking to Solaris last night before her show, last night her time, I think, or middle of the day her time. I don't know. Great show, and all I can say is, you know what? If you're missing out on her shows, you need to get in the archives, in the Freedom Slips archives, and look up her archives, because you know what? She has some amazing guests.
Guys, if you don't know this, Solaris's show is almost entirely guest driven, which is fantastic, and she does get awesome talent, very good information, and it's actually right across the spectrum. Right, so as far as the information is concerned, it's not just single topic shows and such. This is covering everything, guys. The whole gamut that might interest you. So please tune in. She'll appreciate it, and we do too. And stay on for us. You're listening to us now. So that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, we've got a great show today for you. Probably going to cover off a few things before we get cracking with that. But we do have a guest, which is brilliant, and we'll talk about that in just a second. A few things have happened this week. Dave, do you want to mention a few things, or should I just jump right in?
Jump straight in.
Okay, look, there are a number of things which are concerning us at the moment from a geopolitical perspective. The news that are coming around, the falling oil price. I wouldn't have thought that I would see prices at the Bowser this low in my lifetime. I'm glad they are low. There's a knock-on effect, of course, right? We spoke about the death of the Saudi king, whether or not this might be related last week. I think it was a warning shot potentially that was fired, in front of the bow of the Saudi ship, if you will.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
Because obviously it's right. It's a fight that the OPEC, or the oil-producing countries, have with the shale oil producers in the States. We said this before, the only running costs most of the oil-producing countries have today, the established ones, is the running of an electric pump that gets the oil out of the ground, whereas the shale oil producers have got much higher startup cost. So falling oil prices will hurt them, might in fact make them unsustainable, because we've talked about peak oil before, guys. Okay, so peak oil I think is a myth to some extent, and I'll tell you why. We're talking about peak oil of economically viable oil or oil reserves, so oil that can be extracted relatively inexpensively, so it's fairly cheap to get it out of the ground.
It's the cheap oil. It's easy to get.
Correct. Overall, though, I mean, there's still lots of oil there. It's just harder to get to, and it's just not viewed as economical. So you don't get a gigantic payoff. It's just a smaller payoff if you go after it. Eventually, it'll become necessary potentially to do this. But right now, we're seeing and in fact, this is not just between America and the Arabs. Everybody's involved because everybody uses oil wondering where the Chinese are going with this. And there are a few other things, obviously, that are still worrying me. Now, the ISIS group has increased their activity, and now they're also operating in the Sinai, which is in Egypt, or well, it's southern Israel, if you will, and that's an expansion of their, I guess, their efforts. So we're looking at a very unstable geopolitical situation. Okay, the dollar is rising for now. The Chinese still holding trillions of dollars in reserve, in bonds and so forth. So right now, I think we really have to watch what is going on. And I was looking at my cupboard, and I'm stocking up on some foods and water and so forth, non-perishables. Not a bad idea to do that, because this particular situation that we have right now, the supply chain could break at any moment. I mean, if the oil price is as volatile as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, there's nothing to prevent the oil from going up rapidly again as well. Okay, so it can get to a point where nobody can afford to ship stuff around anymore.
Because that's when we start to see hyperinflation.
Correct. Correct. So look, this is just this is my little bit that I had, Dave. Don't have anything else on that front.
Oh, it's just all I was going to mention was the if Queensland is one of our seven states, I hope, and 7 regions, and the pendulum has swung against the hard right wingers who just want to sell everything. So that's really good to see. It's more about the human face, I think, of everything, and not the lies, not being poisoned by the federal version of the same party. I think that's really what did it. But we'll just wait to see what happens with the other states, and we have a headstrong leader whose impertinence is only getting himself into trouble. And one of the quotes came from this week was from his own advisors, was ignore the latte sipping keyboard warriors. Tapas eating keyboard warriors. Now, I don't.
This
know
is cappuccino, by the way. Cappuccino here.
Yeah. I've got a full 20-ounce coffee right here, and it's awesome. Yeah, in our very own shiny side out mug. But look, all I can say is that this disturbing trend of autocracy from leaders who aren't voted in based on policy, who once in, lie, cheat, and steal to get in, and then go ahead and do their own thing, and that isn't what democracy is. It's meant to be our decisions based on our wants, and they do those things for us because they're the elected official. Lie is not good, and they should be immediately dismissed. And it is a shame that doesn't happen at the top. And Mecci, I have to say, I was at a party yesterday, a very good friend within the family, and we were having a discussion about 2 topics. One was Google, and they were talking about that as being a great investment. The investment opportunities within Google are fantastic. And I said, look, just Google 22 points of interest and then get back to me, because then I'd love to hear from you. And as Mecci knows, the 22 points of interest can follow you so quickly, it isn't funny, around the globe, and they know who you are. And one of the other points that I was making with big data during the week, was that not only, this is in a shopping centre, for instance, in a large brand that is an umbrella through lots of brands, that they can know who you are if you use plastic to buy your foods, your whatever it is that they sell, whether it's tires, food, whatever, or by the pattern in which you buy it. They know who you are, how many people in your house, whether you have pets, whether you have a monthly child that comes back into your, so you have custody once a month of a child. They'll know that. They'll know it because of your purchase history. Now, that kind of stuff in big data comes out all the time, and I'm not going to say where or whence it came, but they also have now eye tracking, which it can track your eyes and what items on what shelves you're purchasing from. Despite big data already doing that for you, they're able now to choose, and if you've chosen a different price, a different product first, and then just decided to change your mind based on whether it was price or brand because of which one you picked up. So, look, this was alarming, Mecci, to the people I was telling. They were quite surprised to hear that you'd be able to find out so much just from what is currently buried in data.
You're correct. Look, it is actually big business now, and my company that I work for has gone into it in a big way as well. It is, in fact, look, all this data is out there, all this information is collected. In fact, we've given it away, Dave. We've given the information away. If you're on Facebook or MySpace or any of those social sites, even I think it's Google Talk. Oh no, it's not Google Talk. Whatever it is, whatever they have there. Google Plus. That's it. Thank you. Whatever it is that you're doing out there, be mindful as to what you're posting or what you're revealing about yourself or what you're putting online to be safe or to be saved for you, like passwords or whatever. Because once it's out there in cyberspace, right, the cloud, whatever you want to call it, it's there forever. It is there forever, and people have access to it. Yeah, sure, there are security precautions. Yeah. There is, trust me, I'm in IT, Dave is in IT. Yeah. There is no such thing as perfect security online, on the line. It doesn't exist.
On the line. The moment you say it is, it's already being hacked.
Done. Exactly. So the one thing that is actually more worrying in what Dave has just said, the eye tracking. Now, yes, they can do all that, but you know what? They can also identify you by your eye. A database is being built that stores all the irises. An iris is better than a fingerprint. Okay, an iris is better than a fingerprint. It's more unique than a fingerprint, believe it or not. And it is in fact something that you can't do without. You need your eyes, right? I mean, people can chop your fingers off and do all kinds of things, right? If you're running around blind, that's not really going to help you. So your eye is more vital than your finger. So people can identify you by your eyes. And they can follow your eyes, and they build this data about you. They know everything about you. There's now something called predictive. Okay, there's predictive technology, which will now calculate what you will do, what you might like. They will create the demand for something that you don't even know you want yet.
Yeah, that's funny. They create a demand for something you don't even know you want yet. That's right. This is like Minority Report.
Completely like that.
The next thing they'll do is say, you know, because of an anomaly in some database, that their software has found that you're going to do something. You haven't even done it. In fact, you may not have even had a thought that you might consider doing something, and yet they already know that you're going to do it.
You're exactly right, Dave. That's good. I mean, you know, this is future crime. A future crime. What's my crime? No, it's your future crime. What? and so you know, you can argue. I mean, this is in fact the United States are already following on that path. Very crudely. I mean, they've arrested a whole bunch of people with no hope of release. There was no due process. There was no trial. They're just kept in Guantanamo Bay or whatever the rendition centers are forever to prevent them to. You know, I guess, well, that's what they say, to prevent future terror attacks. Okay, you know, we don't want to have a terror attack, I get that. But, you know, there are human rights still.
And at one point, if you let them go, don't you think they're going to have harbored a deep resentment against their captors?
Well,
do you think that exasperates the issue? That's a Simpsons quote, by the way.
But they mean well, don't they?
Yeah,
they mean
completely. Mecci, we had, was it David Hicks? Been released, and he was now by the US government declared not guilty.
Yes, that's correct.
Of any crime.
Well, the thing is, he was charged for something that in Australia was never a crime either.
It's not a crime here.
No, not a crime here.
Then I said, oh, now he's innocent. Well, I mean, it's like watching a movie you end up not liking. You can't get the time back.
Yeah,
that time's gone. So you know, he spent years in a jail without any proper charge or evidence.
Being tortured, in fact, right? Yeah. I mean, being in jail is one thing. Being tortured while you're in jail is a whole different thing. So, and we don't know. See, the thing is, I don't know, tinfoil hat on, guys. But you know, he's been there for a long time. He was tortured with the same kind of methodology that was used to turn people into mind control assassins, potentially, right? We've discussed this with you. So, do we know that David Hicks is not that kind of person now? In fact, everybody that's released from American imprisonment now, from those holding places, could potentially be a sleeper. For the Americans, or for the elite, or whoever. I'm just saying, right? I think it's a very strong possibility.
Do you know what, Mecci? I'm just going to say the code word once. This is the official code word. Rosebud. Right? So that's just activated, everyone. Good luck with that one. Do you know what, Mecci? Do you have anything else?
That's it, sir.
Okay, good. That's a pretty good segue. I think it's a good enough segue.
I think it is.
We can go. I think we'll cross to our guest. Now, look, our guest today, he is, well, from everything that I've said, I don't want him to see if I've done my research okay or not. An abductee. He's also been exposed to high levels of spiritual warfare and special. He's been involved in special ops.
Not
I
me.
don't know which side that
Not
is.
me.
Not you, right?
No,
So,
I just research it.
Yeah, good.
But
he researches
go
special
ahead.
ops, right? There's the adjudicator right there. He has worked in telecommunications, civil service roles, intelligence and counterintelligence. He's a student of military history, researcher of abductions and MyLabs, which we'll be getting into a lot more detail with. And he's currently, I think he's still currently, working on a documentary called "Don't Mention the Reptilians." And you know, that pricked my ears up. I'll tell you when I've mentioned all this. Welcome to the show, James Bartley. How are you, James?
I'm fine, David. I'm fine, Mecci. You shouldn't have mentioned Rosebud. You had me reaching for my copy of Catcher in the Rye. And then
I was going to say that, yes.
And then I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of latte. Okay, so we've gotten off to on the wrong foot. But just a little bit about myself. I'm an independent historian. I specialize in military history with an emphasis on intelligence, counterintelligence, and special operations. Military history from antiquity to modern times. And I used to be in the intelligence community. I worked in communications for Commander Naval Air Force's U.S. Pacific Fleet, and I've attended many somewhat high-level meetings in that field, and so I know my way around the intelligence community, at least the surface-level aspect, and I've studied the history of it. But I also, unfortunately, have found out personally, and also with discussions with many friends about the deep black aspects of it, and that's nothing to laugh about. There's many people out there today who this minute are being messed with. They're getting electromagnetically beamed. They're getting gang stalked, and they're basically being driven crazy. And then, when that isn't enough, they plug them into the psychiatric tyranny, and then the psychiatrists go to town on them. Though, so it's at times can be a dark subject, but it. The subject of alien abductions, reptilian abductions, and military abductions needs to be brought out because there's a lot of confusion in the field. There's a lot of disinformation. So that's in part why I'm here. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Thanks, James.
You're absolutely welcome.
That was a great introduction by James of himself. I love it. It's fantastic. It really was.
If only I'd done my research.
No, you did, mate. You did great.
I was reading my own bio. That's why. Go ahead.
No, Dave, that's what you need to buy on your book. Sorry, James. There's a question we ask all our guests, and in your case, I'm extremely interested in the answer. I always am, but with you, I'm fascinated. What happened in your life, or what event or events, or what I don't know, what did you see that would turn your life around? Maybe 180 degrees, 90 degrees. I don't know in which direction your life was going at the time, to do what you do now, to engage in the research that you engage in, you're poking the bear, right? So why do you do this, and what happened?
Well, I had a number of experiences myself. Throughout my life, I had a number of UFO experiences. I thought at one point I was being haunted because I was always feeling presences and objects would move around on me, and a whole gamut of phenomena occurred in and around me, and it even affected the people who hung around me. Friends, for example, they would see UFOs around me, or they would, if they were spending time with me, or I was spending time at their house, things would happen. So, in the back of my mind, I kind of knew this stuff was going on, but I kind of shunted it in the background. The category of too weird, don't worry about it. And then when I came back from Germany in the autumn of 1990, I had a series of UFO events. Now I believe that the UFO experiences cycled back, because that's what they do for a lot of people. They for some they run in cycles. For some it's a constant thing. And I had a bunch of experiences in '88. Couldn't really put my finger on them. A bunch of experiences in the early '80s. But when I came back from Germany in 1990, it all came to a head, because I had a full waking consciousness abduction with what are known as the reptilian greys. If anyone out there has read Dr. Carla Turner's great first book, Into the Fringe, she describes a hypnotic regression by my late great mentor, Barbara Bartley, given to a guy named Fred, who was a family friend of Dr. Carla Turner. And out of this regression came descriptions of these reptilian greys. And I had encounters with those same reptilian greys in 1990. I also had an experience of a gray looking out at my TV set at me and zapping me with some kind of like electromagnetic zaps, for lack of a better term. If you would have looked at me, I would have been laying there sleeping with the lights on, because of my experiences, and I've had to overcome this and wean myself off it. There were periods of time when I would sleep with the lights on, and to this day I could sleep with a spotlight above me. It wouldn't faze me at all. But I had to learn to wean myself off of that. So on that particular occasion, I had fallen asleep with the TV on, and back in 1990, it's not like TV wasn't an all-night affair like it is today. At a certain point in time, they would play the national anthem, and then they would have the flag waving, and then the color bars would pop up on the screen, and after that, snow would pop up, right? Yeah. Well, when the TV was in the snow phase, that's when this gray popped up on the screen, and I was sleeping, but in my mind's eye, it wasn't exactly a split screen, but somehow I could see what was going on in my room and see what was looking out at me from the TV, i.e. the gray, and I could feel the zapping sensations in my brain because it was zapping me somehow. And the other part of my split screen, I could see my younger brother clear across the other side of the house, basically freaking out at the image of the gray on his TV. And my younger brother has figured prominently in a lot of my experiences, a lot of my UFO dreams over the years. And so in order to test his reality, he punched his dresser. And this happened to him while he was wide awake. Understand, I'm laying there for all intents and purposes asleep. He punches the drawer, bang, and then I abruptly wake up. It was as if he punched my wall. And then the first thing I did was I looked at a TV screen. It was back to snow. But I know what I just seen. That he had seen this gray, he punched his dresser, and the dent was still there. He showed it to me the next day. Now, the next morning, he had this kind of weird look on his face, and I got tired of him kind of glaring at me and feeling resentful towards me. And finally, I had to ask him, like, what's your problem? What's going on? And then out of him comes this whole experience, and he takes me to his room, and he shows me the dent that he put into his his dresser. I go, yeah, it was the ET in the TV, right? I saw the same guy, but why are you blaming me? And that what's interesting is that is a not uncommon reaction for people who, if they're around you and they start experiencing all this phenomena, somehow or other they kind of blame you for it. It's like, everything was hunky-dory in my life, then you showed up, and then all this stuff started to happen. Well, you know what? I didn't ask you to hang around, and he was kind of my brother, so it was like nothing I could really do about that, you know what I mean? But that was just an example of a number of experiences over the years, and to cycle back to your question, one of the pivotal moments in my life was when I left San Jose, California, where I had a lot of experiences, left San Jose, California, went to San Diego, California, clear at the bottom of the state. I soon joined the San Diego UFO Society, which was a world-class UFO research organization where we did real UFO research, not this silly lights in the sky kind of trying to come up with excuses to explain away every sighting, which seems to be the chief form of amusement for a lot of so-called researchers these days. No, we did real research. We sent teams out to the high desert of Southern California where the underground bases were. We interviewed and spoke with and worked with alien abductees, reptilian abductees, military abductees. We started to get all these reports of cases of people being taken not just by the aliens but by deep black elements of the military. And where my real pivotal waking up moment occurred was when I attended a conference in Los Angeles, a UFO conference, and there was a number of well-known speakers there. And I'm an inveterate book reader. That's, I'm always reading books. So I was in the exhibition hall. Actually, it was the hallway, and they had a bunch of long tables set up with all these books. And I gravitated towards one of these tables, and I looked down, and there was a book, which some of you may have read, called Shadows of Power, about the Council on Foreign Relations, written by James somebody or other. And so I picked it up, I started thumbing through it, and lo and behold, it didn't matter whether these guys were Republicans or Democrats. I'm a recovering Republican, by the way. It didn't matter whether these guys were Republicans or Democrats. They were all members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Some were with the Trilateral Commission. Some were the Bilderberg Group, as I came to understand later. And then when I read that book, a light bulb came on, and it dawned on me, that's why nothing ever changes, other than things get worse. It's because they're all playing to the same sheet of music. David Rockefeller founded the Council on Foreign Relations. It all makes sense now. It all makes sense. The bureaucratic inertia, why the ball never bounces the way of the people. It always just seems to work out for the benefit of the corporations and autocratic control. And so when people ask me, James, what was it that made you wake up? Well, it was the aliens. They started abducting me, or at least I remember them abducting me again. And then I wound up at this conference, and I found that book, and that changed everything for me. And another thing that was interesting too, because of my studies in military history. A lot of the big names in the military, in the scientific community, post World War II, 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. I was familiar with those names from my studies of World War II. General Nathan Twining, General Hoyt Vandenberg, a number of the Manhattan Project scientists were directly involved in the analysis of recovered alien technology and the back engineering of alien technology. So it was. All that kind of came into play for me. It was my adjustment at that point was as simple as like rolling over in bed, right? And I should point while we're on the subject, point out that there's a lot of people that are maladaptive out there. And what I found is, especially those that went through like years and years of indoctrination, ex-military people, there's this weird disconnect where they themselves may be an ex-military whistleblower talking about their own UFO experiences while on active duty in the military, and they themselves know firsthand about the nature of the cover-up. But then the weird disconnect kicks in where they believe all the other lies. They believe about all these woo-woo scary terrorists that want to take our freedoms. They believe that vaccines are good. They don't believe in chemtrails, even though there's a perma chemtrail haze above us every single day. It's like they still don't want to let go. They're maladaptive. It's this hive consciousness, Borg collective kind of syndrome where they seem to compartmentalize everything in their mind. There's a term in the military, in intelligence in general, called cherry picking, where you have your own predetermined set of biases, your own particular agenda, and you pick raw intel. You pick it in ways that'll suit your own agenda. Right, and you studiously ignore anything else that kind of muddies the waters or would tend to make your whole analysis kind of fall apart. And I see this with a lot of these ex-military whistleblowers. And what I also see going on today, has been going on for a while, is it seems to me that the powers that be are creating this kind of priesthood once again of these ex-military types who are presenting themselves as the authorities on the subject. They even go so far as to say that anyone who's a civilian is unqualified to to make UFO reports or to report anything of an ET nature. That somehow only those that are ex-military or current military are somehow qualified to talk knowledgeably about the subject. Of course, that's nonsense. You have these limited hangout types like Nick Pope, who goes on TV and says that, your average civilian is a Joe six-pack, and his comments about UFOs and his testimony is meaningless, right? And no one calls him on that because it's all a big chummy kind of gentleman's club atmosphere in the UFO community. You have real researchers, so-called, hanging out with known gatekeepers, known debunkers, known shills, but they're all just buddy. It never occurs to these guys that gatekeeper is the physical embodiment of everything that's wrong in this entire planet. And you see, that's what pisses me off, and that's why I don't hang out at UFO lectures and conferences rather, and why I'm not a big joiner inner, and my intel requirements are few. There's only a few things I'm really interested in. In general, I'm a generalist. I like to know everything about everything. But when it comes to my field, there's only a few things I'm really interested in. And so, I just have bypassed the UFO community. To me, it's an enemy strong point. I'm moving on. You know what I mean? So that, in a nutshell, is my story.
Look, James, I completely understand what you're saying. And in fact, a lot of what you said echoed with me very strongly. I'm sure Dave feels very similar. You said something very important in your examples. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up, you said the elite is out there and they're all setting it up, and Joe Average, Joe Blocker, Joe Sixpack. I love that. It can't really win, and you're right. We can't. Do you feel, or have you come across in your researches any information that would point to a depopulation agenda? Or, certainly we're moving into a feudal system, I guess, with the elite overlords. Now, Jeb Bush is going to run for president, the third Bush, in 20 years.
It's a Truman Show, isn't it? It's the Truman Show.
It's the Truman Show, yeah.
But what people should understand is that the concept of depopulation, Agenda 21, so on and so forth, that's literally as old as the hills. Because if one takes the time to study the ancient text, and I'm talking not just the well-known kind of Babylonian, Enuma Elish, and so on and so forth, but from the South Pacific Islanders, from Polynesia, it's a very common theme where a god / ET comes to a Noah-type archetypal figure and says, okay, basically, there's too many of you, okay? And sometimes in some of these ancient and not-so-ancient texts, they're quite specific. Okay, we've used plagues on you, we've used floods on you, we've rained fire from the heavens, there's still too many of you, right? So what they do is they tell the Noah archetypal figure, okay, we're going to have this deluge, for example, as one type of cataclysm, and get yourself prepared, so on and so forth. That is a meme that is common all over the world, and to me, the significance of it is that this non-human being, this God, basically said that we are going to be depopulating you lot. It's like there's too many of you. You're breeding like rabbits, and what people have to understand also is that. A great book to read is William Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden. It's absolute classic, and he talks about these medieval accounts of the plagues and how the chroniclers of the time described these strange-looking beings that were like in the cornfields and the wheat fields, or rather the wheat fields and the barley fields, and they were seen to be spraying kind of the fields with the crops, and they had backpacks on, and then there were accounts of craft flying through the air and spraying. Well, geez, that happens all the time today, you see. So what people have to understand, long and the short of it, is this whole depopulation agenda didn't start at a Bilderberg group meeting in the 50s. This concept of culling the population in a cyclical pattern, and being a military historian, I see this also. It's like, gee, back in the Roman times, they had like thousands. There'd be like numbers of legions, and like 70,000 Romans were wiped out in one day by the Carthaginians, and way back when. But then you fast forward hundreds of years later, and the armies are much smaller, like several hundred, a couple of thousand. We go from people living in opulent palaces and having internal plumbing, and then they're living in wattle huts. They're living in mud thatch huts. It's like there has been these periodic cyclical efforts at depopulation, and what I thoroughly believe is that the powers that be, in actual fact, that non-human powers that be, working through their hybrid human plantation managers here on the surface and below the surface, they're pushing up against a celestially driven cataclysm. I am a firm believer that the Nibiru system is here. I've seen enough imagery, all kinds of different imagery, to satisfy me that there is what amounts to an extra solar system in our solar system, and it's already having all kinds of effects on the Earth in the form of earth changes, weather problems, et cetera, and then overlaying on top of that, if that's the word, it is how they're exacerbating all that with harps, scalar weapons, and so on and so forth. So they know that this solar system is back in our solar system, and they're pulling out all the stops now, because now everything is out in the open. Like David Icke says, he said that there's going to come a point in time when this is just going to come out in the open, and we're there now. And so there's pulling out all the stops. The tyranny is being legitimized, and it's in your face. And like the vaccine agenda, for example, that is blatantly depopulation. And an autistic boy, even if he manages to survive the ordeal, right, is not going to reproduce, right? Likewise, likely a girl who, whether she outwardly suffers severe symptoms from the Gardasil vaccine, the HPV vaccine, is not going to reproduce. And then the GMO, the chemicals, the fluoride, and everything else. So we're there now. What they're trying to do, it seems to me, is make it so that as we enter into this period where the earth changes become more and more radical, they'll be able to retain control. So they're setting it up for themselves so they have a soft landing, vice us, who's, we're going to have to deal with all this stuff, those of us stuck on the surface, having to survive. And notice how they're making it so that we can't even survive on our own anymore, that we can't even go off the grid. People that have vegetable gardens are being raided by the police, and so on and so forth. And it is very much, I'm glad you used the term feudalistic, because in the old days, it's like if some, I don't like to use the word peasant or commoner, but say some guy goes onto some lord's woods estate somewhere, chops down a dead tree. If they catch him, they hang him, right? Nowadays, they're making it so like wood burning stoves is illegal, and that's just going to give anybody excuse. Somebody could be using a fireplace. Somebody could be having a backyard barbecue. Here comes a SWAT team, stacked 8 deep. They're going in, bang bang, killing all the dogs, throwing stun grenades in. You see, I liken it to Norman invaders riding through an English village with their double-headed battle axes, just swinging and just killing and raping, and it's easy to see why, because those are their shock troops, all those police. And who or what are they? They're a bunch of reptilian hybrid psychopaths, is what they are, because they fit a psychological profile. Psychology follows neurology, which follows genetics every time. And there are some gatekeepers out there who want to imply that, okay, all these psychopaths and control freaks, that's just some kind of psychological aberration, as if somebody is like absent-minded, or somebody, kind of is impulsive. You know what I mean? No. Just as a dog breeder can breed into these dog breeding lines particular physical and psychological attributes. It's the same thing with these elite, and it's not just like interbreeding, but it's with advanced genetics too. So that's why psychopaths are basically in every strata of society, in every institution, in the hospitals, in the doctors' clinics, in the social services. It's a dystopic, Soviet-style, hardcore collectivist society, and that's what we have looking at us right in the eye. And what's interesting also, and I'd like you guys' thoughts on this, and just flapping my gums here, but we're starting to see this separation where, by all outward appearances, the people are I hate to say it, they're getting dumber. It's like the younger people, correct me if I'm wrong, 25 and under, it's difficult to carry a conversation with them. They don't even look you in the eye. They're distracted. They oh God, I got to check my Facebook updates and all this other stuff. It's their consciousness is so fragmented, and that's what I love about David Icke saying that it's a war on consciousness. It's the muting of consciousness, right? And so that's where we're at now. And I don't know if I answered your question, but
look, they're fantastic. No, you did.
Can I just want to make a point on this? You deliver so much information in every answer. I just want to say, by people today with their smartphones, and I've got a smartphone. I confess I play part of that world, but the people who think that using the software is actually bringing them closer to their friends when actually it's isolating them.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen the Facebook post of like a bunch of people sitting around a dinner and they're all looking at cell phones. It's very much it's the Borg collective, and it goes back to what I feel happened is that after the most recent cycle of celestially driven cataclysms, give or take 12,500 years ago, right around the midpoint of the
that's the date that we've got to as well.
Right around. And I think these cataclysms lasted for a few thousand years because not only was the galactic superwave an issue, which Dr. Paul Laviolette talks about, but also comets and stuff. And so by the time the Earth settled into its new axis, there had been not only a mass extinction event on the surface, but the surface geography was radically changed over. And when the survivors came out of the cave systems, the much smaller demographic, the much smaller population gave these negative aliens the opportunity to really impose all these genetic changes on the survivors. And plus, a lot of the advanced civilizations either went underground, went off-world, or for whatever reason were no longer in the picture. So it kind of left the door open for these reptilians and other beings to, mess with the gene pool.
Can I just intercept one more second? The underground bases, and you've talked about this a couple of times already, the underground bases and the people left on the surface, the surface dwellers. If the underground bases are filled with, the elite and, the cohabiting reptilians and greys working together with the military, remember they're all in deep underground military bases. If they're safe and we're, all three of us and all our listeners as well are the poor suckers that have stayed alive through whatever cataclysm. We're the canary in the mine for them. Is it safe to come up now?
You mean as far as like either going public about this?
No, post-cataclysm, yeah.
Oh, you mean the ones that
the few that are left?
The few that are left. Well, in a plane of probabilities, right? Any number of these things may or may not happen. Some of them may run in parallel with one another, and some have a higher degree of likelihood than others. So, but it seems obvious to me that the powers that be are preparing for a mass extinction event of some time. Yep. Fukushima certainly didn't help, okay? And that's just one example. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it seems to me that the so-called elite are hunkering down because, and I'm jumping all over the place though, because some of my sources, my labs I'm in contact with in different parts of the world. They're not just in America or the UK. They're throughout Europe and places. And some of them are telling me that there's a lot of logistical operations going on in the underground bases and seemingly in the off-world installations where they're moving a tremendous amount of cargo. They're either preparing to go underground for the long haul, or they're pulling up roots and they're leaving the whole solar system, or at least the planet. I would think the way the celestially driven cataclysms work, that just going to another planet wouldn't really help. I mean, if you look at how when Ison passed by Mars and Mars sparked up and turned green, I mean that's pretty freakish. You know what I mean? So what's going to happen is as time goes on, we're going to see more and more overt efforts at control, and there'll be more and more overt efforts at depopulation through wars and whatnot. And we're already seeing this play out. I don't know if I answered your question, but
you're giving us so much more than a simple answer to our question. I want to say a couple of points for our listeners in support of the things you've said as well, guys. Just so you know, there's actually been a gene identified. It's called the warrior gene, and what James talked about here, the psychopathic tendencies, have been identified to be stemming from that gene. A lot of people have it. Not everybody has it turned on. Your upbringing has a lot to do with it, right? But that gene exists. So he's completely correct in saying that these psychopathic tendencies we see are in fact neurological, and then of course based on the genetic underneath that. However, there's more. You said all the things you mentioned here for the last hour. I'm just blown away by how much, in fact, almost complete overlap there is in everything we have researched and everything we've spoken about to other people as well. And I'm just blown away that you can articulate it so well and bring it together so coherently, because these are so divergent subjects. It's not even funny. Now, the thing that I wanted to know from you is as well. Obviously, you think that these extinction events have happened before. We think the same thing. We've got, in fact, evidence for that. It didn't just happen with humans, but over hundreds of millions of years.
Fossil
exactly
record,
right.
Big time.
You're 100% correct. So the thing is this, right? My question is, ultimately, right? Ultimately, they are keeping our numbers down, and Dave and I have put forward a theory which is called the awareness cascade, by which we postulate that at a certain number of people, we think it might be about 8 billion or 7.7 billion or whatever it might be, we could potentially achieve ascension. Because right now, you're right, people are being dumbed down. We're moving very fast towards a state of idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's I think
movie.
It's
Not
right?
sure. I'm not sure if I've seen that. But go ahead.
It's a future state of the world, right? The world is run by idiots because everybody's an idiot, and but the problem is that this is happening. The food, the chemtrails, the fluoridated water, the education system, which I don't want to call it that even anymore, right? And we have now given our children disorder. It's called instantaneous gratification disorder. If you don't get a text message from your friends to a post immediately, you actually go into some kind of seizure, right? Internally,
Yes.
It's debilitating. Now, this is the thing. What is it? Do you think it's possible that they're trying to prevent us from escaping this black iron prison, I like to call it?
Yes, absolutely. You see, what's going on is mainstream physicists, and you can check this out. I can pass you some articles. They're freaking out because normally stable elements such as carbon-14 are exhibiting more rapid decay. And a lot of these articles went out in the mainstream science websites a few years back, and then they all started disappearing, right? Because the physicists were really alarmed because, if we're made of carbon, we're carbon-based units, to use a Star Trek term. So, well, what does that mean for us if the matter is decaying even more rapidly than normal? But the thing about it is all those articles, just about all of them, were stripped from the internet. Fortunately, there were a number of metaphysical, esoteric-oriented websites that made their own versions of those stories. And what's also happening is that the Schumann frequency is increasing. I remember when it spiked up to 12-something a few years back, and then kind of settled back down to 8-something, 8-point-something. But still, from 7.83, if memory serves, going up to 8.5 something, and earlier being up to 12. That's a quantum leap, and we have all the energy streaming in from the galactic core, intensified cosmic energies and gamma energies, the Seifert bursts that Dr. Paul Laviolette talks about. And so all these things together, combined, I would believe have a tendency to activate dormant areas of our brain that would tend to reassemble the DNA strands that are still within the morphogenetic blueprint resonance of our DNA, because we are the sum of all of our parts. It's not just the past lives we've had on this world, but the past lives in other dimensions and other planets and so on and so forth. All of that is still within our morphogenetic blueprint resonance. And there are people today that are working very hard to heal, reintegrate, and reconnect with their diverse multidimensional selves, so they get back to being the multidimensional quantum being they used to be. Because at one point, the ultimate ceremony of virtually all the traditional societies around the world is a ceremony that harkens back to the original uncorrupted creation, the original uncorrupted, non-distorted source code, if you will. And there's a lot of esoteric traditions about bursting forth from the dark void of Sophia and all that. And then, you know, all this manipulation, this matrix crap started kicking in, and then we have this miasma of pain and suffering that we find ourselves today. So I believe that, like, for example, the chemtrails is a multifaceted operation. It's not just infecting people with nanobots and making people ill, and it's not just concealing the Nibiru system, but it's a concerted effort to prevent us from absorbing photonic energy. We are surface dwellers, so photonic energy, for example, it activates the higher centers of our brain. I mean, if you know, we always hear about like sun gazing, but just laying on your back looking up with closed eyelids at the sun, I mean, that has a beneficial effect on people. But now we have this phenomenon called global dimming, where I have friends in London, and they say it's like dim and gloomy there all the time now. And that's just one example. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona. That was one of the most heavily chemtrail places on the planet. It's a sci-fi nightmare there. And so we don't even have a normal sky anymore, right? And so all those things combined with the GMO, the vaccines, and all the carrier wave frequencies that are being blasted out, the frequencies of rage, the frequencies of fear, of so on and so forth, all that tends to keep us in a lower vibratory state, which will plug us into the bandwidth of all these negative beings, right? And the thing about it is, it's not just illicit drugs like cocaine and especially methamphetamine and its derivative crank that can turn someone pretty much into an instant host for a reptilian or other entity, because using those drugs puts us into a sympathetic resonance with these negative beings. This is why you always hear about meth users going berserk and just wiping people out and just doing horrendous things. It's because the entities jump without parachutes into those people because of all the excess energy they're exuding, and they use those people as a medium through which to wreak havoc and mayhem on society, right? Well, what we found out is that these pharmaceuticals do the same thing. A lot of the pharmaceuticals plug people in psychologically and frequency-wise into these lower vibratory states, which is a haven for these negative beings. So all that tends to keep us from ascending. It's not just people that are ascending or have the potential to ascend. It's the very planet itself. The planet is an organism. It's a consciousness. All these planets are. Well, the ones that are real, not the artificial ones. But so there's a process whereby planet Earth itself will perhaps even, for lack of a better term, split at some point, where this higher vibrational frequency version of itself will, quote unquote, ascend. And we're stuck using certain terms. I mean, the New Age la-di-da has really corrupted the whole concept of ascension and love and light and all that stuff. But, we're just kind of stuck with the terminology. So one aspect of the Earth will ascend, and then the other aspect of it, which doesn't ascend, will either stay kind of stuck in neutral or actually descend. And so each one of us has the potential within us. If we can reassemble as many of these extra DNA strands, that are still latent within our morphogenetic blueprint resonance, we have the means to ride the frequency wave and basically get out of here. Because what I always stress to people, okay, people freak out about the New World Order. They freak out about if they're familiar with the cyclical nature of these cataclysms. That's not what worries me. What worries me is if this process of soul harvesting, soul recyclement were to continue, because then everything would be all for naught again. And we got to get out of this concept of yugas where, there's a golden age, a really cool age, a not so cool age. No. The original uncorrupted source code of this entire plane was basically what we would call a paradise. And now the New Age la-di-das say, it's a plane of dualities, you're here to learn. And it's like they come back over and over again with your memory swiped. You keep coming back into a more tyrannical. Wow. That's like reform school. It's not like like
James.
So
Sorry, but you look. The truth is, I can't even tell you how aligned we are, and I'm astonished that we are. Maybe I shouldn't be.
It's the latte.
Maybe. No, but it's true though, because for the last 150 odd shows we've spoken about this. We've taken people on the journey to exactly that conclusion, right? And what we can do. And you're 100% correct in everything you've said. We've done the research. We've come to the same conclusion. Other people have as well. I listen to you, and I could keep on listening to you for hours and hours because it's you're on the money, right? And I want to say to our listeners here as well, listen to what James is saying, guys. He's on the money. He has done the homework. He's done the hard yards. So this is thank you, James. I mean, and sorry, we are rapidly approaching the end of the first hour, so the music might start any moment, but. Please, guys, don't go away. There's more coming, and James has much more to share with us. And James, I really am. I'm not just blowing smoke up where the sun doesn't shine. I think we are really aligned here.
I just want to make a quick point before the break. It's just that it may seem to the uninitiated that I'm all over the map, but the plain truth is it's all connected. It really is all connected, and so that's kind of the way my mind works. I'm kind of a lateral thinker kind of guy,
It's awesome. I have to say this, and I really mean it, Dave. I'm actually almost speechless here.
I know. I've never seen Mecci speechless. Do you know what, James? You mentioned a lot of stuff there, and I'm trying to type it in so we can get some more detail from you. But you were talking about all of the different ways in which the quickening, which has been documented in so many religious texts, and been foreseen, and the remote viewing and everything like that. There was a question. One of the questions coming from the chat room. Actually, it was another host on the same station. Is there ET human trafficking on the moon at this moment? Remember, within 40 seconds, we're going to go to break.
Yes, if you mean are humans taken from the surface and brought there essentially as slave labor, absolutely. Yeah. That goes on in the underground bases, but I've spoken to a number of my labs that were taken there against their will. And Niara Easley, I've known her since 1993. She was taken in a craft piloted by a reptilian, and she was put up there and put to work as slave labor, basically. So that kind of thing does go on. See, these MyLabs got to get out of this notion that, oh, I'm a super soldier. No, it should be healing, reintegration, and returning to our quantum multidimensional selves. It's not about, I killed this alien, I saved the universe, I did this, I did that. That's all left brain, egoic kind of thinking, if that's a word. And we got to remain heart-centered, because through the heart center, we plug in divine source. We got to maintain the balance between the divine masculine and divine feminine. And we just got to tune out a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's difficult to do, but it's easy to get bogged down in the details. And we just have to remember that it's a frequency war. If there's one thing I can stress before the break, it's a frequency war.
Awesome.
And you just got that in. Beautiful.
You did. Awesome. Look, after the break, during the break, if you can do two things. Can you donate, push the donate button, and type your questions in, which we're going to ask James after the break. We'll get right to it. Thank you so much, and hold on tight. We won't be long.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
Hello and welcome to Revolution Radio here at freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported internet radio station in the world. So, want to ask you, do you have a favorite host or several here at Revolution Radio? Don't have the time to catch every show when it's live? Well, you can get all the shows of your favorite host for the year 2014 on one data DVD, so you can play on your preferred device at any time. The cost, just $30 plus shipping. Now, remember, I'm just one guy, so allow up to 2 weeks or 10 business days for delivery. Also, the hosts themselves get half of the net proceeds. So not only are you supporting Revolution Radio, you're supporting your favorite host as well. So just go to our homepage and click the banner that says your favorite show. It's just down. It's easy to find. Big old letters. Anyway, so thank you. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. We are taking pre-orders for the 2014 and we'll start shipping after.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958. And Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported radio station in the world. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with Dave and Mecci's Shiny Side Out on Freedom Slips, or at freedomslips.com. I should correct my little typo phrase there. There we go. That's right, as Hawk said, the number one listener-supported talk radio on the net, which is in the world. Or I don't think it's in the world. I think it includes the ISS and anywhere else we have the internet being pushed to these days. Since it is listener-funded radio and you like what you hear, that's an if statement, please go to freedomslips.com. I'm just telling you to go there. Go to freedomslips.com right now. Push the donate button. It's on the site support page. Really easy to see. As Hawk says, it's in big old letters, and I love the way he says that. It's on the left in chat. If you're there, your donation is greatly appreciated and helps run this station. It does. It's very important. Without you guys, there is nothing. You support us. We're giving you the info. Mecci and I don't get paid for this. If you like and you prefer not to just simply push money towards the station, why don't you buy a CD of your favorite host? I don't know. I'm guessing maybe Shiny Side Out? Buy a Shiny Side Out DVD from last year's shows.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. I'd like that. Or if you donate a specific amount of money, check the website for details, you will get things in return, like a seed pack, as the bumper suggested. Honestly, I mean, you can't lose, right? Honestly, do that. And I want, and remember, Mecci, I think we had a T-shirt giveaway.
Yes, we did.
We did. We had a T-shirt, Shiny Slate Ad T-shirt giveaway, and
we'll do it again, right?
Yeah, why not? Look at that. There we go.
Ah, there you go.
There we go. In fact, look, I prefer to send a mug. These mugs are awesome.
Mug is good.
Right?
The mugs are awesome.
20 ounce. 20 ounce.
You don't have to have a 20 ounce. We've got smaller mugs as well, guys. Okay.
I'm going to suggest that if you're making a donation to the station, could you write in 20 ounce if you want one of these, say coffee mug, 20 ounce.
Yes.
And I'll have Hawk send me those details and I'll give you one. All right? So,
that sounds good.
Only one. It's only one, but go start donating now. Put 20 ounce in the donation text box, and you'll get one. All right. Thanks so much. Remember that's open to the first donator, not all of you. I'll go broke.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
And I'll also put another caveat. It's anything over $15. Donate $15. I'll send you a mug. All right.
I think that's fair. That's fair.
For the first person and only person that does that. All the rest of you, thank you so much for participating. Wow. Do you know what?
Right.
That was lucky. Phew. I'm going to say this is like having two Meccis on the air at the same time. It really is. I love it.
I'm sure James is better looking. That's all good.
I'm just going to put the title screen up. There you go. Everyone can see James. Look, this...
We were separated at birth.
Clearly.
Look, can I ask you, and don't,
the likeness
I don't want
is
to be indiscreet.
Yeah,
Sure. Which year were you born in? I don't want to be indiscreet or overstep the line, but I'm just curious.
I'm a Scorpio dragon born in November 1964. Wow. Chinese year of the dragon and Scorpio.
Right, I'm a Rooster Leo 69. Interesting, very interesting.
Oh, cool.
Wow. I'll just say I'm 67. There you go. So 1967. Look, this is fantastic. It is a jam-packed, solid interview. It's one of the best on our list, James. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on.
Do you know what? You've mentioned so much stuff, and as I said before the break, I was going to read out some questions, and there was one question from Jerbear in the chat room. We have a chat room on the station. If you're listening to this, go to freedomslips.com and you can join the chat while we're on air. That's the interactive nature of this whole thing. And the question was, do you know anything about the Dark Knight satellite?
I've seen, if what Jebba is referring to is the imagery of that dark-looking craft that's just beyond the atmosphere.
Yep.
I've seen pictures of it, but I don't really know anything about it. I'm sure it's a lot bigger than it appears in the imagery. Chances are, my guess would be it would be an alien craft. Probably not, or some satellite or something, alien satellite, but I don't think it would be like man-made. That's just my feeling on it.
Yeah, there's to not get too close to sci-fi, because I don't want this to be imaginary. There has been people who observe other in science fiction. There's been writers who've written into it, like the people who look after them. They tend to them. They're either the maintenance people or they're observers or doing studies on them in lots of different races, in lots of different books and movies. It's quite possible that there was something like that, because Mecci and I, we also have the belief that in Europe there's a planet defense system, an ancient.
Yes, is that the one
the installation?
Yeah,
Russia, the installation that it's the Russian researcher. He talks about the wands of Horus. His name escapes me at the moment, but yes, I believe that absolutely. And then recently, I think it's in oh geez, where is it? Romania or somewhere? They found some other huge underground alien facility, and they're all over.
Absolutely.
Look, that's the fascinating thing, right? I mean, this is just and we can't actually go there. People are being discouraged from going anywhere near those installations. So look, I think the key thing here, just to summarize very quickly for our listeners that might have just joined us for the second hour, James has just outlined pretty much our last 155 shows for us. So thank you, James. And essentially. We'll be looking at repeating cycles of extinction. The elite is, of course, behind that, fostering their own agendas, keeping us from ascending for whatever dark purpose. And I'm not sure what it is. Maybe actually, James, that's a question for you. What do you think the ultimate purpose is? I mean, if they keep us from ascending, I mean, they keep themselves from ascending as well. I mean, what is the ultimate purpose? I mean, if you know or speculate. Mm-hmm.
The problem, as I see it, and some of my colleagues have talked about this with me and others, is that a lot of these archontic beings, for lack of a better term, they're parasitic in nature, and so they reside on this plane, in this dimension, but also some of them reside in what's been described as a lower fourth dimension and other places, and what they do is they've created a simulation of a reality for us, and I'm part of a really good group online where we study all the strange artificial cloud formations. See, a lot of people, they practice a lot of self-censorship. They're so into being credible and being acceptable, so they just stick to one thing like chemtrails. But an experienced sky watcher will say, you know what, that cloud formation, that looks like a dolphin, that looks like a big alien, that looks like a dragon. I mean, down to the most minute detail, a lot of these images are reproduced in our skies. And some would argue, okay, well, hologram technology, some of it probably. But I also believe that there's a bleed-through effect from the other dimensions. The dimensions seem to be merging, and the timelines seem to be merging, because a lot of these negative beings delight in messing with time. And so what happens is a lot of these beings in these other planes, as well as this one, they're parasitic. And so they need to keep us in this kind of like docile, oblivious state where we literally don't even know the history of our own planet. I mean, ancient history is described as anything just a few thousand years old. That's ridiculous, as you know. It's like, look at like Cremo's work and Richard Thompson, Forbidden Archaeology. What humanity, or at least human-type beings, have been here for millions of years. So what they've done is they've created this simulation of a reality where we're recycled in this soul recyclement, soul harvesting process, and we come back. You see, it's the difference between the soul and the spirit. A lot of people talk about, like a soul partner and a soul love and all this other stuff, but I liken it to what David Icke talks about when he talks about the bodysuit, where we're like consciousness encased in these bodysuits, and when we reincarnate, those of us who kind of plan on coming back here, because I don't know if we're gluttons for punishment or what, but some of us feel that we've got like a mission to do here, and we come here and we accept all the inherent limitations and the inhibitions and the memory swipes and whatnot. It's not just the physical bodysuit that's the problem. It's the difference between the soul, which I really believe is an artificial construct. Think of it as a bubble. Think of it as like a diving bell. Think of it like when you see a certain kind of spider that like creates an air bubble for itself and it dives down beneath the surface. Because the artificial construct known as the soul is in itself a microcosm of spirit from which we came from. It's a simulation. And it allows these negative beings through past life bogus soul contracts that we make under duress, deception, confusion, ignorance, right? It allows them to hook all these energetic cords, attachments into us, con us into making all these bogus soul agreements. And what happens is we begin to accrete karma, for lack of a better term. They manipulate us in such a way that our actions in this and in our past incarnations, oftentimes made from a point of an externally imposed ignorance, right? So we make all these poor choices and bad association, bad decisions. All this negative karma accretes and accrues within us. and that's what's like burdens our soul. And so when we incarnate into our present incarnation, it's not only that we're coming from a wounded, shame-based, wounded inner child standpoint, because so many of us have, had to deal with, one form of trauma or abuse or another, right? Whether it's health issues or whatever the case may be. But we bring with us all that negative baggage from past lives, which we're not even aware of because of the memory swipes. Mm-hmm. And so the way they set up this matrix construct, they set up these soul groups where, yeah, sometimes they're beneficial in that like, okay, you and I, us three, it's clear that we're in the same or a similar soul tribe, as I call it, right? We're somehow we found a back door in, and we were able to see through a lot of this BS. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it takes a little, it takes a while for the coin to drop for some, and some people, they just catch on really quick. But the problem with these soul groups is, like, for example, if person A is destined to be a spiritual warrior, a paradigm buster, a frequency raiser, they will stick these archontic controlled people directly into their family unit. So they will have like siblings that are full-on raging Draco hybrid hosts and who just peck away at their self-worth and psychologically abuse them and all this other stuff. And then they grow up with poor self-worth, and then then all the problems that ensue from that. Because in a hive consciousness fashion, and it may seem like I'm kind of diverging again, but I'll kind of cycle back to answering your question. What they do is they plug all these negative people in our lives at certain key crossroad moments. And so oftentimes, because of like a wounded shame-based background and a need to seek approval, because we wind up being people pleasers, we go along and agree to things, and we hang around with bad association that radically, for a time at least, and some people their whole lives, radically knocks us off track, radically knocks us off course. And it's an attrition rate. There's a lot of people that volunteered to come here and to do this work. Only so many were selected. Of the ones that were selected, that somehow bypassed the spiritual prison net and came back with. See, the people that I interact with, they're not only abductees in my labs, but in past lives there were like high priestesses, there were shamans, there were medicine men, there were military commanders, interspersed with some relatively mundane lives here and there. And then some of them have past life memories of being ETs involved in the wars in the Orion constellation and whatnot. And so a lot of those people are unmercifully attacked lifetime after lifetime. I mean, I'm in contact with a number of female in my labs where it's like in one past life they were burned at the stake, in another they were tortured to death in the Inquisition, another life they were stoned to death. And those are all manifestations of this harsh patriarchal regime where anything that smacks of a manifestation of the divine feminine, the whole system will just come down on that woman like a ton of bricks. And so that's why we have so many, the marginalization of the divine feminine in our construct now. And see, that was a big part of this manipulation system too, is it's the divine feminine working in balance with the divine masculine that plugs us back to divine source, that plugs us back in after we remove all the traumatic blocked energy within us, which we've accrued through lifetimes, right? And then we begin to reassemble all these extra DNA strands. We begin to plug back in the divine source. Well, they don't want that. And so they know about us before we know about ourselves. And so from an early age, especially women, but also men, they'll be hammering these people over and over and over because they see them as latent potential threats, especially my labs, because these my labs have all kinds of metaphysical powers. I mean, they can shift their density, they can walk through walls, they can teleport. And what's interesting is when the controllers get a hold of them and when the negative ETs use them in these ops, suddenly they can somehow activate all these latent metaphysical abilities within these people and utilize them as operational assets to advance their agenda. But then they're returned, and lo and behold, it's like, gee, I wish I could do that in my regular life. You know what I mean? The capability is there. It's latent. It's dormant in our normal state of consciousness, but we can still get in that direction. But we got to do a lot of self-work first. So we go through lifetime after lifetime, and it's a micro and it's a macro thing, because they'll attach cords. Some favorite places they like to attach these energetic cords to is their lower back, the upper back. That's where a lot of the entities first hook onto the auric field, and then they see, through a process of genetic manipulation, they've created all these hybrid bloodlines that have indeed like a spiritual predisposition to being taken up as a host, right? Because in truth, we're all hybrids of one sort or another, and some people have DNA from a number of different ET races, not just one. So what these reptilians in particular do is they create all these bloodline streams of predominantly reptilian DNA, and those people have a genetic predisposition to being taken up as a host, right, by these entities. And so these people that have the potential to be a paradigm buster, right, they really hammer them. They attach all these cords, and then on a macro sense, what these archontic entities do from the lower fourth and other dimensions is they have what mystics and seers and remote viewers have described as big machines. They look like, for all outward appearances, as big machines with big honking hoses and seemingly tentacle type things that plug into our reality. And because they've created this miasma of pain, suffering, of want, of lack of abundance, so on and so forth, they just siphon off all this negative energy which they themselves have created on the surface. It nourishes them at our expense. You see, because we're resonators. We're resonators of frequencies and emotions, and it behooves them to keep us in a low vibratory state. That's why we have entertainment industry. That's why, all the different things that keep us mentally. Also, what they like to do is install these OCD thought loop programs into us, where not only are they obsessive compulsive thought disorders, but often is not negative ones, which are laden with negative emotions and negative vibrations. So you have people that just are in a state of despair, hopelessness, lack of self-worth, and those OCD thought loops just play endlessly over and over and over and over. And then the entertainment media, just let me finish this point, they promote that. It's like, that's why in America, for example, all the radio stations play, doesn't matter the genre of music, they play the same stinking 7 or 8 songs over and over and over, because they want those songs to play in your head over and over. And all that tends to detach us from divine source, from our heart center. And it goes back to the imposition of alphabet language, shunning us into the left brain hemisphere, away from the right hemisphere, away from our heart center. And with an alphabet symbol language, you have scribes, priesthoods, which interpret the language and impose laws and punishments, etc., etc. You see, so all that tends to detach us from our true, original, uncorrupted source selves.
But you've just preemptively answered our question. Thank you, sir. But I've got to say something, right now, and I've not experienced this very often in the recent times, but I feel like I'm oppressively being attacked, to be honest with you. I have this massive heavy air on my head. I can't explain any other way. So James, I think that they're picking up on what we're talking about here. So it's I can feel the oppression.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can, but yeah.
Well, what I can do is I can aim my tensor wand and my tensor ring and my selenite wand at you, and hopefully that helps. I'll send intentions out, because what people can do on a practical basis is we can use tools like tensor rings. Tensor rings are an amazing tool that we can use. For your listeners that are not familiar with them, it goes back to ancient Atlantis and probably out there in the cosmos. The original basic tensor ring is what's known as the sacred cubit measurement. Sacred cubit measurement. It's 20.6 inches long, and you take a length of copper, right, 20.6 inches long, of ideally, I would believe, like a thicker gauge than a thinner gauge, and then from the left to the right, you initiate a right hand corkscrew from one end to the other, and then you loop the two ends to form a ring or a hoop, and then you solder the ring, and so you have a tensor ring. What that does is it negates the positive and negative polarities and creates a toroidal torus energy field of 144 megahertz.
Toroidal, yeah.
Yeah, it's toroidal, because in our reality, for better or for worse, there's a lot of toroidal energy fields, and
Yes.
Everything down to like the atoms, they spin. They're dynamic rotating systems, you see. And so what these tension rings do is they put out these toroidal fields, and if you place them under your bed at night, say if someone's an abductee or a MyLab, they will go some way towards providing protection. And some of them can also enhance one's metaphysical capabilities too. And the selenite, I can't say enough about the selenite. Sometimes it takes a while for the coin to drop for me. A dear friend of mine in America gifted me a nice, columnar shape, about 6-inch length of selenite, and I held it. I felt the buzz. This is cool. I promptly set it down next to my keyboard and forgot about it for 2 weeks. And what happened was, my Native American spirit guides, 2 nights in a row, a whole long story, but they encouraged me to start using the selenite, right? And it was interesting, the image that they presented to me, where they showed me the skeletal structure going from white calcium to an amber crystalline substance, and then turning into like a crystalline substance, and then back into the regular skeleton. And that told me that because our DNA is liquid crystalline in nature, it's a transceiver, a sender and receiver information, and that the selenite, because it resonates at such a high frequency, it has a way of activating kind of ourselves, our higher chakras, and all that. So there's a lot of things we can use as tools. I've got a Rife machine right now behind me. It's broadcasting out the 40 hertz grounding frequency. Sometimes when I go to sleep, I'll crank out the theta wave frequency. Sometimes I'll crank out the 528 hertz heart center frequency. So kind of like I immerse myself in these kind of uplifting vibes. You see what I mean? And so I don't have to constantly, consciously put out intentions and constantly put up shields. You know what I mean? They're tools, and I make full use of them.
Whatever you did, I'm actually, to be honest with you, the pressure from behind my forehead is going, and I'm feeling a lot cooler. It's really, I know it's strange, I sound like a crazy nutter, but it's better now, thank you.
Oh, it's quite all right. It's, anything I can do to help. We can talk more about it some other time. Yeah, and did you guys have anything else you wanted to ask me?
Oh, completely.
I've got 100 questions.
Yeah, monatomic gold, right, Dave? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, firstly, before I put that out there, I was going to say, James, you mentioned popular culture and the entertainment industry. We know that they do the bombardment, and they're trying to synchronize everyone's brains. Have you ever listened to 2 different radio stations and heard them playing the same thing? So they're trying to synchronize everyone. And one of the things that I thought was to ask you. Do you think that X-Men popular culture features superpower kind of shows? It's happening more and more in video clips too. I saw someone lift off the ground because energy came out of their hands. Do you think it's in some way related to the MyLab manipulations? As they're teaching us what we can do if we really try.
Yes, they're kind of putting it in our faces. And you see, when I was a boy reading Greek mythology, that stuff was all real to me. It never occurred to me that the Greek mythology and Norse mythology and what have you, that there was anything wrong with it. I always knew at an innate level that these things were possible, right? And I really got into Marvel Comics. I wish I'd saved them all in pristine condition, but I used to devour Marvel Comics and the X-Men and the Avengers and all these different superhero groups because I knew at some level that we could do those things. And again, it has to do with the genetics, because within the genetics, the ET genetics, which many people are carrying around, are latent metaphysical powers, not of just from one ET race, but from a number of ET races, right? For some people anyway. And so what the controllers have managed to do, human and non-human, is be able to activate those latent abilities within the people and utilize them in these programs. Truth to tell, because there's always another side to the story, that some of what I would perceive to be good ETs also utilize MyLabs and abductees to kind of counteract the nefarious activities of the more negative oriented beings, right? So it's not all just one thing. I mean, after all, this is a plane of dualities, which people never fail to tell us, and that's true enough. And what's interesting is back in the early 90s, before Facebook and all this other stuff, I had this email group list I was a part of. It wasn't any actual forum, or it was just a bunch of people where we would CC each other in our emails, and we were all having abduction experiences and whatnot. What was interesting is the stories that we were sharing with each other. And sometimes we would have shared experiences, and we were kind of picking each other's brains to see who remembered more about a given experience. A lot of the stories that we were sharing with each other were literally winding up on TV shows. And what's interesting is that, like, there's a lot of TV shows going back to the 90s. I wasn't even aware of these things that have a distinctly MyLab, Monarch, MK Ultra theme, right? And I wasn't really aware of all that until recently, actually. And so they've been planting these seeds all along, and it's a way of inoculating the public, if you will. So when someone comes along telling these stories about, being a MyLab and being utilized as an operational asset by aliens and, deep black military, someone can just say, oh, you just saw that on TV or in a movie. Well, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And it should be understood that MyLabs are not strictly like human type of operatives. I mean, they're essentially MyLabs from throughout the cosmos. You see, these beings, they work very much like the ancient Romans did, and the tribes that they would conquer that would go along with the Roman Empire agenda. They would provide auxiliaries. They would provide all these different troops that had certain specialized military skills. It would be slingers from, from this place. It would be archers from this place. It would be Gaelic cavalrymen, right? Because they were really good with horses. And the Romans would incorporate all these different tribal skills to use in their war machine. And so it's very similar to what goes on with MyLabs, where these different alien groups will utilize MyLabs because they know not only the different types of ET-DNA they have, but they know the latent abilities and powers they have, and they utilize them in these programs.
So, I was going to stretch this out a bit and get some more information on the abductee experiences. Just, we've all heard, star beings, Pleiadians, Nordics, Grey, MyLabs, and everyone wants to know which race is it that's abducting people or them, and ultimately the question comes down to, are they benevolent or not? That's where really it all goes down. It boils down to that one.
Yeah. And I've had positive encounters with positive beings myself. But I talk, about the negative beings because they're the ones causing all the problems, right? People always accuse me of being a fear monger and all this other stuff, but the positive beings aren't the problem as I see it. And I see us residing in our part of the cosmos, at least, in what is essentially a reptilian Draco sphere of influence, right? And that some of these other beings are essentially cosmic vassals of the reptilians. They do a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the abducting, a lot of the medical procedures, and so on and so forth. Now, to be sure, some of these cosmic vassals are trying to carve out their own niche, if you will, trying to get their own little slice of the pie, right? But they know that in order to be able to operate in our solar system and on this planet, that some of them are obliged to have to do things for the reptilians. I've known of cases where a reptilian would come on board of a ship and the Greys would be terrified, and the reptilian would like slash his arm forward and rip the chest open with his claws of a Grey, and the little Grey would just fall over dead, right? And the Greys would be terrified. It's been described, that particular incident was described as if the Admiral came on board, right? And it was a reptilian. But there are other main players too, like the Mantis beings. They do a lot of work in and out of this dimension. They operate a lot of these machines and other planes and other dimensions that have like hoses that hook into our our reality, and also hoses and attachments that hook into people, right, or places. Because I believe the good beings did something way back when. They set kind of a default system in place where, excuse me, where the grid of this planet would begin to reactivate again, right? And we're starting to see that with the Bosnian pyramid, and we're seeing photos from can't remember, Teotihuacan, not Machu Picchu, but one of those South American, Latin American pyramids where they're starting to activate and see. Because the beings way back then knew that we were going to come to this point in time where the grid had to be activated again, right? And so one of my friends pointed out something too, and I may be going off on a tangent here, but she noted that that the chemtrail patterns in her area seem to be right over ley lines. Now think about that, right? If they're laying, and some of these chemtrails go clear over the horizon. I mean, what if they're just like covering up all these energy grids and these vortexes? Because it's all about frequencies. It's all about gaining control of certain naturally occurring and artificial portals and stargates and whatnot. And that's what a lot of the conflict seems to be about too. Is because more and more beings of both polarities are showing up in our solar system. Those of your listeners that are familiar with the Soho imagery, it's just stupendous, the scale and the size of the craft that are coming in, through the sun stargate and hanging out by the sun. All kinds of weird off-the-wall shapes too. And so what these beings do is, like the Greys, the Reptilians, the Manus beings, the Draco, and a variety of other beings, because we're a rich source of DNA, and they're all into some degree or another the soul harvesting kind of soul fragmentation game. If they can't get someone's soul, they'll chip off like a fragment and just use it to nourish themselves, whatnot. It's part of this process of reintegration. What a lot of people have to understand is a lot of these negative beings, they hang around in places where there will shortly be a large kind of like a lot of death will suddenly occur, right? For example, I study military history, like the Battle of the Chattanooga campaign, November 1863 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There was a very large sphere-shaped craft. Now, what's interesting is my mentor, Barbara Bartley, the late great Barbara Bartley, she talked about the craft, of the sphere-shaped, globe-shaped craft, being what she called soul repositories, right? Where they would, a lot of people, abductees, have described being in those craft. I know people that have been in those craft, and they literally store souls, but some of them also are quite demonic souls that they're going to, at some point release into our plane, right? But also souls of just people that have been killed. And there were stories about the Battle of Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce against the English, and how there was a lot of UFOs hanging around it. And this is a commonality throughout military history, right? That they just happen to hang around places where there's going to be a sudden loss of life. And what's interesting is a lot of the dreams myself, other abductees, my labs have had, we have kind of an early warning system. And so a lot of the stuff that we've seen in dreams of like a sky that's just covered with artificial, like a permahaze of chemtrails and chem clouds, it's all dark, and then like in the gaps of the perma chemtrail haze, you see like the underside of big craft like slowly moving along, or you'll see the shadow like above the artificial cloud cover of a very large ship, and parts of it poking through, or sometimes large ships coming down through the chemtrail haze, and just an apocalyptic kind of setting, right? And panic in the streets, and huge sphere-shaped craft like hovering just above the surface, and what's interesting is, because of this perma chemtrail haze, the people that I'm in contact with that do a lot of analysis in the skies, they have the editing software where they can bring out the contrast and whatnot. They're seeing not only a lot of cloak craft of varying sizes, some of them to be sure man-made, but not all of them. And there's a lot of poorly cloaked craft. And there seemed to be like an interdimensional aspect where it may look, it's in the texture, and by all appearances, it looks like a cloud, but it's got straight lines. It's in a big triangular shape. It's box shaped. It's all this weird stuff is showing up in our skies. And recent imagery that a friend of mine did with imagery of the sky, she did the contrast, and lo and behold, there was all these images in what would seem to be just a big cloud formation, but they looked to me like pictograms, like the kind you would find in Utah or the desert southwest of America, right? Like these pictograms that like the ancient Indians had drawn onto the rock. And so, I mean, that's working on a subconscious level. So there's all this stuff in the sky, like these big aliens in the sky, these big ships in the sky. They're all there, hidden in plain sight. A lot of the chemtrail researchers look at it and just tune it out. I mean, they may recognize it for what it is. Gee, that looks like a shark, or gee, it looks like a dragon. But they don't tell their friends about it because they want to stay credible, right? But I mean, we're seeing that all around us, and to me, it's a manifestation of the melding of the dimensions. And Nibiru is a big part of this because I feel there's an interdimensional aspect to Nibiru. Not only is it in this plane, but because it's supposedly the planet of the crossing. Because as you know, this is the plasma electric universe model is the correct model. Mm-hmm. And I've seen video of the Nibiru system off to the left of the planet, from the perspective of the viewer, it was to the right of the sun, and the sun was blowing out huge solar flares and huge emissions in the direction of the extra planets, and it was lighting some of them up, right? And I'm thinking, wow, if one of these big extra planets winds up between us and the sun, like we're going to be in the line of fire. There's that kill shot they're talking about. Mm-hmm. What's interesting in the last 15 minutes, I should point out that one of the most important whistleblowers that ever come forward, for some reason he's unheralded, for some reason people don't talk about him much, but it's a guy named Dan Sherman, and he was literally born into the program. His mother was an abductee, he was an abductee. They did the aliens, the Zetas did some genetic hoochie-coo with his mother and him to make it so he would one day be guided into a position with the National Security Agency, in particular, what was then known as the Air Force Security Service, now known as the Air Force Electronic Security Command. And he was groomed from before birth to be an intuitive communicator, or an IC. And he was told when he was read into the program that, this is in the early 70s, mind you, the early 70s, that the purpose behind what they called Project Preserve Destiny was that sometime in the future, unspecified date, was that the grid is going to go down and there's going to be no more power on the surface, right? Panic in the streets kind of thing. But they told him, we still have to maintain commo with at least this type of ET, this particular ET race, the Zetas, right? And so I thought that was interesting. What was interesting also was the communications were only a long number designation as well as latitude, longitude coordinates. Dan Sherman figured out that the number designation was an identifier for a particular abductee, and the lat and the long coordinates was where they abducted him, where they put him back, and he did countless of these. Right? They would come in a stream. That was his job to note all this information down, and he kind of got the willies about it because he knew it was kind of weird. But the point of relevance is, at least as far as the early 1970s, it was apparent to the powers that be that at some point the grid was going to go down. But what's interesting is it reflects what my labs and abductees and basically gifted people all over the world have dreamed about as one probability, right? That somehow or other the grid's going to go down. There's going to be all kinds of pandemonium, and there's variations of this, nuclear wars, and there's like fireballs coming out of the sky, which is already happening, so on and so forth. And there's even, believe it or not, it sounds corny, but I've spoken to my labs and abductees. They've been having these dreams and also these my lab ops for many years now. The possibility exists they may pull out a zombie apocalypse wild card. because
Really?
some of the MyLabs I've spoken to have been told by the controllers that at some point a pathogen or something is going to be released. And you know how these things work? They're often binary, where they work in conjunction with scalar HARP and the nanotech and the chemtrails, whatever the case may be, vaccines. And that people, they won't be undead. They'll just basically go crazy. And we're already seeing manifestations of that, right? But what's interesting is many people have not only dreamed about this, but they've had, MyLabs have had combat operations involving...
Combat training, I've seen it.
Training involving zombies. And what's interesting is because of the deep black militaries, or some of them at least, ability to... And yes, folks, time travel is real. They're doing it routinely. They actually send teams to alternate realities, alternate Earths, right? I do believe that some of the MyLab ops that people have conducted or been sent on where they battled zombies may have been done in some alternate reality Earth where this is already played out. Some of the MyLabs I've spoken to that have gone on a lot of these time travel ops, and what's one of the interesting side effects, if you will, of these frequent time travel ops is at times they wake up and they're in an alternate Earth. It's like, it's like things aren't exactly the same. It's not their same bedroom. A buddy of mine told me a funny story. He got up out of bed and he bumped into the wall because in the other alternate reality, the wall is in a different location in relation to his bed, right? And then he'll walk around the house, and then things will be a little different, but it'll be an alternate reality. And also the bleed through occurs even when they're driving around town. Like for example, a guy will be driving past the strip mall, which he drives past every day. Practically every day of the year, but this time when he looks over to the left, it's not the same strip mall. It's another place. It's like now there's a theater there, now there's a restaurant there, now there's like a electronics store there, completely different. and on one occasion, this MyLab buddy of mine, he had a little bit of time, and he pulled into the parking lot. He got out and he went into these different stores, interacted with the store staff, so on and so forth. So people are, and then he got into his car and went on his way. When he came back, everything was back to normal, and that's happened to him a number of times. So, getting back to the whole thing about the grid going down, the zombie apocalypse is just the revealing. That's just like a potential wild card. It may not play out. It has a more or less probability of actually happening, but there's a whole bunch of other probabilities which may or may not play out running in parallel. Nuclear war, radical earth changes. So many people I've spoken to have had dreams of tsunamis and whatnot, and two suns in the sky, and so on and so forth. So it's an early warning system for these people, and I would tell them that consider yourselves fortunate, because I would say that people like us and MyLabs and people that have paid attention to this kind of stuff, they have a far higher likelihood of surviving whatever comes down on the surface in the future, because in a real way, many of them have already lived it. Many of them have trained for this in virtual environments, but also I do believe they're sometimes sent forward in time and sometimes sent to an alternate reality, some of these MyLabs. So I believe that one or all or maybe only a few of these things may transpire. We just have to see how it plays out. Nothing is written in stone. And ultimately, here's the way I feel about it before we run out of time. It's like some people say, oh, we have to stop these earth changes. Well, you know what? Let's back up and look at it from like a higher spirit perspective, okay? Let's say we found a way to stop all these earth changes. So then we just going to be satisfied with this tyrannical, like global, like technotronic police state? We're just going to be, okay, well, at least we're alive, I mean, throw us a bone, why don't you? You know what I mean? Because if these earth changes happen, it's going to radically change the architecture of control on the surface. That's why they're doing everything they can to make it a soft landing for themselves, so they still retain some semblance of control when all this stuff begins to play out. You see what I mean? So, and also when people talk about ascension, yeah, but what are the mechanics of ascension? Will it require a huge culling in some way? We're already seeing a huge culling in the form of the vaccine agenda, Agenda 21, so on and so forth. But what if it goes in a hyperdrive because of celestially driven events, so on and so forth? And people have to understand that an alien invasion, see, people they comfort themselves. Oh, that's all blue beam. Well, maybe, maybe not. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because in some of these alternate realities that people have been sent on, they're literally, in some of these alternate realities, they're already going through an alien invasion where people are cowering in their houses because the Greys and other ETs are literally abducting people in broad daylight. And I mean, it's just now we already know that all kinds of stuff goes on. It's just not reported, and because the lamestream TV news droolers just tune into the mesmerizing stuff they're fed, they don't know what's going on. Okay, they don't know what's going on. We see gradations of this too, where people that conduct what I call surface level research, the outward trappings of the reptilian overlordship, i.e. the New World Order, but they still censor themselves. They have to, because when you bite into any part of the lie, you're buying into the whole lie. They don't want to hear about crisis actors. Oh, of course people were killed. You're disrespecting the family members who've suffered these losses. Mm-hmm. You see, but that's biting into the whole lie. That's hook, line, and sinker, right? Of course they're crisis actors. They use the same ones over and over again. It's a theater of the mind. And so there could be an alien. It goes back to the artificial sky, so much being hidden in the skies above us. Because there are times when I'm walking down the street and I see a really dark shape in a low-hanging cloud, and I go, "What's in that thing?" You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so the things that we've dreamt about, they're playing out in the skies in front of us right now. Here's what I think. Okay, I think that by the time 2017 rolls around, the surface will be like a radically different place than we're used to seeing. I think that things will really start hopping within the next several months, getting to about November, September, October timeframe, and then going into the spring of 2016, they'll really start to accelerate. And I think they want to make the financial implosion. They want to time it. They want to have it run in parallel with these other things. And kind of make it like a controlled thing where everything is put in place. And so when the pandemonium erupts, and they're going to let people just run amok like chickens with their heads cut off, like rats in a barrel. Let's let everyone start eating each other for a while, and then the peace enforcement, so-called, comes in to kind of mop up. But they're going to let things play out like that for a while, and it has everything to do with the financial system, right? Which itself is an alien construct, because there's a book out there called I forget what it is, but it's channeled material, but it's from these aliens, and they talk about how the same game plan is used in all these different worlds. The imposition of a monetized debt system, harsh patriarchal, apocalyptic religions, and over and over and over, right? It's the same game plan because it always works, right? And so what we're going to see as time goes on is and we're already starting to see runs in some of the banks and in big banks in Europe, and the derivatives are starting to unwind, and people are having a hallelujah breakdown because fuel prices are low, but they don't really know what that means, right? So, but in the last minute I got or so on the show, I'm hopeful. Remember, everybody, we're spirit. We come from divine source. It's no matter what plays out on the surface, if we do what's right, if we do our part, we'll stop this soul recyclement harvesting process. We can choose to incarnate on any world that we choose to incarnate in. And if we come back to Earth, we come back to Earth on our own terms, not because we're hatched or excreted here. You know what I mean? We come back on our own terms, either in a ship, a Stargate, or because we choose to reincarnate here, not because we have to. And so I really believe that there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of good things. Let's ride this frequency wave, just like a surfer. Let's ride it and consciously begin to just raise the frequency of this planet and ourselves. And that's already happening, actually.
Well, James,
they can't stop it. They can't stop it. No matter what they do, they can't stop the increase of the frequency of this plane. That's the good news. Yeah. You see?
Yeah, this is exactly the same message Dave and I try to give our listenership. Hope and love, right? Just you have to raise the energy level, right? The vibration has to come up, and it's up to us, right, James? I mean,
it is.
At the end of the day, we create the thoughts around us.
That's right. And in the spirit world, thoughts are things. That's why they want us on these OCD thought loops of despair, of hopelessness, of want, of lack of, right? So let's just raise the vibe and just keep marching on, and things will play out the way they're supposed to.
James, we've had huge feedback from people. I'm getting my smartphone's going crazy. I've got a lot of people listening today, and they're all so interested in this. And look, I know that people can catch you around, look at your videos, and if anyone happens to be around, you message Mecci and I, and we'll try and hook you up. You know what?
Oh, sure.
We have to do this again. We
Yes.
must do this again soon.
Yeah.
I've got like 30 questions we couldn't ask.
I want to hear you guys take it. I've just been flapping my gums all the time. I want to know what you guys know. And
James, it would be exactly the same. There's the music, though. So James Bartley, guys, look him up on YouTube. He may be speaking as well. Just have a look if you can find him. Thank you so much for being here, Dave.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Don't skip the ads if you're watching it. All right, if you're watching our channel. Jump into freedomslips.com. We'll see you next week for show 154. Take care, everyone. Thanks, James.
Thank you.